Cool, cool. Well, we'll give it a couple of minutes, I think, before we start diving into this one. But I'm excited for this one because I feel like I finally found a fellow Signal nerd that I can truly shoot the shit with.
Go. Also, light nerds apparently, right? These look pretty good next to each other.
Dude,
Got some neon pink, some neon blue. It's not bad.
what made you go blue? So two questions, which are totally irrelevant to
Yeah,
the webinar. What
yeah,
made you go for ghosts as like your mascot, and
yeah,
what made you go for blue? And what made you go
yeah.
for Vector, actually? Give you three.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting one. So Vector was like the first of those three things, right? So we've been, my co-founder and I have been working on Vector for, 2 years. We were in winter 23 batch of Y Combinator. And
Yeah,
like everyone here knows, right? Especially if you try to start a company, right? Like you pivot so much, right? So luckily we picked a name that had like no relevance to what we ended up working on. And so the background of Vectors, both my co-founder and myself were in the Air Force. I was an intel analyst, he was a pilot. And so we were trying to figure out like what is this word that like could be brandable that we liked. And so like vector is, an aviation term for like magnitude and direction when like flying a plane.
yeah.
Right, you get vectors somewhere, and we're like, we think that's like going to be somewhat relevant to what we do, whether we help marketers or sellers get like direction. Like we feel like it could be a good word, and so it stuck. And then obviously we did all of the time pivoting and figuring out where we were going to land. And when we realized that we were building sort of a contact-based marketing platform, we realized we had this like amazing opportunity to market to marketers, right? If we did that really well, people would fall in love with the brand long before they even understood what the technology did. And so we just like wanted it to feel different, right? So we went for these like fun characters and we built this narrative around like there are buyers on and off of your website, but they don't want to convert. And so they're kind of like ghosts on your website and we'll help you like uncloak them so you can have like more qualified folks to reach out to.
Love that, man. Love
Yeah.
that. And just, I did not know. I knew that your co-founder was because I think I saw a post about him being in the Air Force. Didn't know that you were.
Yeah.
How on
Yeah.
earth have you gone from that to the Signal game?
Good, yeah, good question. I ask myself that every day. Transitioning out of the service is always really difficult, right? Because, as an intel analyst, I spent years looking at infrared signatures and missiles, and there's like nothing in the real world that could ever translate to, right? So like there's
Yeah.
always just like an uncomfortable transition story. But I had a really good mentor at the time tell me when I was making that transition, he said, hey, what did you do in the military? And I said the same thing I just said to you. It's like, oh, I looked at missiles and stuff. And he's like, no, no, what did you actually do? And I was like, oh, I took really technical things and explained them to people that didn't understand them. And he's like, oh, you're a sales engineer, right? Like you're a nerd at heart, but like you know how to communicate with go-to-market folks. Like get into sales and solution engineering. So I did that for like 10 years. And eventually I led the sales engineering team at a company called Drift, which was a conversational marketing platform that did fairly well in its time.
Yeah.
And so like I kind of like took this nerdiness and was always around marketers and sellers. And that's kind of where I got turned on to the idea of like we should build something because people are really struggling to build pipeline and make revenue.
Yeah, nice. And are you were you because Drift got acquired, right? Or did they go public? They got acquired.
No, they got acquired. Yeah,
Acquired,
Vista
yeah, yeah.
Vista bought them and then merged them into SalesLoft
That
recently.
was it. Were you there at the acquisition point?
Yeah, so I was
Okay.
there from early 2018, so just after like Series B. I was the first sales engineer, and then went all the way through to being the VP of sales engineering with about 20 folks on the team. And so was there for the Vista acquisition. I did not stay long enough to see the SalesLoft merger. That was after my time.
Right, nice, nice. Okay, cool. But then you went and started up Vector, and for the people that don't know what you guys are, you should because it's awesome. Uh, do you want to give like a little bit of an overview on Vector, who you guys are, and I
Yeah,
think like because I feel like in my head you have like I guess it's all one like offering, but like you're probably
yeah,
known maybe for two different things, which is obviously your free website identification that you did, and then this like
yeah,
new, which you explained to me recently, which is a freaking awesome tool as well. So maybe dive
yeah.
into that a little bit, I think.
we struggle with that like brand narrative problem all the time because we're trying to do something really big, which is like we're trying to disrupt a really large category of ABM, right? Account-based marketing. And to do that, right, it's as much as we wish it was like you bring a credit card, you swipe it for $50 and like you like get to an outcome. That would be super easy to sell. We have this really hard thing, which is like we're trying to disrupt this thing that has like lots of different use cases and angles. And so often like our messaging can be confusing, but I'll break it down. Like what we are is a contact-based marketing platform. And like our whole theory is that, everyone on this webinar knows that like marketing and selling is really, really hard. And it's only getting harder, right? Like the more people that master Clay, the more AI that's out there, the more emails that are going to get sent, the more noise that's in the ecosystem of our buyers, the harder it's going to get to be noticed. And so our whole thesis is like there are signals, and like we'll talk a lot about this, Max, of like the different types of signals, but not all signals are created equal. There are specific signals that can tell you when a buyer is actually really interested in buying. And this is sort of the promise of legacy ABM providers. And there's really good tools out there, 6sense, demand based, right? They've been doing this for years of like, hey, focus on the accounts that are most likely to buy from you. The only problem is account level intent, account level identity. It can only get you so far. And it typically leads sellers and go-to-market engineers frustrated because it's like, okay, I now know that Coca-Cola was on my website. Like, what do I do with that, right? Do I enroll everybody in our ICP from Coca-Cola into an email or an ad campaign? So what we do is contact level. So the two offerings that we're known for today is contact level site de-anonymization, which is not new. There are companies out there that are like hyper growth. People are really excited. Our differentiation is that it's entirely free. Like, so you can put our pixel on your website, you can figure out who's coming to your website, and we make no money off of that. And the reason for that is because we want people to get excited about the other thing we do, which is figuring out the contacts that are not on their website, but searching things that they care about. So we're able to figure out when people are searching keywords or topics or competitors or looking to buy things when they're off searching on Forbes or Wall Street Journal or any of these other publications that we integrate with.
Nice, nice. That's epic. And I think that's a nice segue into this kind of like whole signal space. But before I do, for everyone that's in the kind of watching, I really don't want this to kind of be like just me and just talking here and then questions at the end. Like fire in the questions as and when we're going through this. Let's not wait till the very end because I quite like it being as dynamic as possible, and I think these things flow better if they are. So, any questions that you have for either of us as we're going through and chatting about signals, ping them in the chat. Let's answer them. But oh, there's a Q&A. Hold on, what's this? Um,
I think you're
okay.
getting sold to.
Yeah, I think I am. Yeah. Yeah.
It tells
Uh,
you it tells you exactly how it is to sales and do sales and marketing right now. You're getting a pitch in the Q&A. That's
yeah,
the
I
only
know,
channel that
man.
works.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, we actually have a question straight away from Chris, though. So let's answer this one because I think it flows nicely off the back of what you were saying. So, signals from search, how are you just leveraging bidstream data? I don't actually know what bidstream data is. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, super good question. Sorry, I just kicked my power cord and unplugged my camera for a second there. Yeah, Chris, it's a really good question. So there's two things that we do. So Bidstream data, what Chris is talking about, and he knows the space super well just by knowing that term, right? So legacy ABM providers, what they do is anytime someone is going to a publication where there's an ad, they are embedding their technology into that sort of bid stream data, meaning when that ad gets placed there, the ad publishers and the DSPs and the demand side folks will sell off sort of the remnants of that information about who the ad went to. And that's where the legacy ABM providers are looking at the IP of that company and trying to figure out like what they were interested into. So, Chris, we do have an element that uses bid stream data. The difference there is we're doing device fingerprinting amongst that bid stream data, so we can get it down to the contact level. But we also think that bid stream data has this like aura to it where it's like, how much can you trust it? Like, is it trash? So we also have this other component, which is a first party data co-op. So we have all these publishers that are not Bidstream data providers that are just providing us like authentic quality first party site visitor traffic that we can also interpret what were those people researching on those as well.
Nice. Nice. Cool. Well, let's go into signals. There's a couple more questions coming in there. We'll get to them in a sec. Let's go on to signals.
Yeah.
What is your interpretation of like the signal landscape? And there are, you mentioned earlier, right? There are multiple different signals and not all signals are created equal. So if that
Yeah.
is the case, how do you view the signal landscape?
Yeah. So we get asked this a lot. And by the way, I just requested screen share permissions. I have some stuff I can share with folks here just to like really help them understand like how
Yeah,
we
just shared it. Go for it.
Amazing. Thank you. So like we get asked this question a lot, right? Like the number one thing that happens is like a CMO reaches out to us and they say like, "Hey, I've heard of Vector and everyone I'm talking to says we need to be doing more signal-based stuff, but I don't know what that means. I don't know where to start." And so this is something that we share internally. This is the first time we've ever shared it publicly, so I hope it's helpful for this audience. This is the way that we help our customers think about, quote unquote, signal-based stuff. And I know there's a lot to interpret here, so let me kind of like guide you to what we mean here. So, there's all these signals that exist in the world, right? There's technologies that will help you understand like ICP selection, how much revenue, how much headcount does someone have? Then there are signals that help you figure out sort of like, have people been promoted? Have they raised money? Have they changed jobs? And what we think about is these are all important signals, but where do they fall in regards to selfish versus helpful, right? So we don't disagree that things like making sure your prospect has enough revenue or is the industry you care about. This is an important signal, but it's very seller centric, right? It tells us whether someone is qualified to buy from us. It does not help our buyer see any value from what we have for them. So these are sort of like ICP creation signals that you have to have. And then I think of things, these sort of this middle bucket as what I call excuse signals, right? They're things that give us excuses to reach out to our prospects. Oh, Max, I saw you just raised a bunch of money, or I saw that you were promoted, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. This is a reason to email this person, but it doesn't make it more valuable. Like it's not the offering that Max is going to get excited about in the email. It's the excuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And so the thing that I love about Trigify and I love about Vector is we're over here, right? We're figuring out like as these things become more prevalent and people get more and more annoyed with sort of the clay generated bad AI in our inboxes, where are buyers going to go to signal that they are actually interested in what we have to offer? And it's things like silent channels, right? Like they go ask their network, right? So there's like cool technology out there like ComScore where you can do sort of like warm intro stuff. There's third-party research, which is like what Vector's focused on. And there's stuff like Max that you guys are doing, which is really, really important, which is they go to digital communities, they go to social, right? They ask their friends. And so if you can pick up on these things, and focus your go-to-market efforts here, it's much more likely that all the outputs of go-to-market, whether it's cold calling, cold emailing, ads, gifting, all those sort of outputs are going to be received much better when they're sent to folks that are showing these signals.
Yeah. Yeah. I really agree with this. And like, I think like the way I see it all the time. Like the way that people are buying in this day and age is totally different to the way that people typically brought, a couple of years ago. And I can't remember the stat, but it's basically saying like, hey, the average buyer these days is like, significantly more like researched and educated on the kind of landscape and things like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, what I love you saying, and I want to steal the term, is this like silent signal that you can't really see it. Like it's not an obvious one when you research a company, and that primarily is because it's done at like a contact level. And I think even these purchasing signals, I think the reason why I was excited to have you on and chat with you is Triggerfy and Vector are probably one of the only few tools that I've seen that are trying to combat this from like a contact-based perspective.
Hmm.
And what does the actual contact care about, as opposed to the company? Because funny enough, I had an investor meeting earlier today, and I was trying to explain to them a little bit around kind of contact level marketing and signals. And I was like, well, put it this way, you raise the fund, but that fund doesn't necessarily mean that you want to invest in me,
Yeah.
right? Like, but that's a company level signal. It's the equivalent, of like a funding round for a company.
Yep.
But, had I seen you be on, XYZ publications searching these things, had I seen you engaging with particular profiles, talking about these things in channels, surging with content around, sales tech tools and things like that, I would then hazard the guess that, you're going to be pretty interested in investing in something like us, for example, because I can see what you're doing and it's more relevant to you.
Yep.
Now, there is an argument that you should almost start with the contact and then add, I guess, that kind of the relevancy and the qualification on to give you that like final like point, which is like, hey, is the person interested? Awesome. That's kind of 90% of the battle done. Then
Yeah.
is the company ready for this as well?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I always think there's a place for multi-layering signals together. Uh, but, ultimately, the way that I view it is humans are inherently selfish.
Yeah.
And you're only going to do something that is good for you, right? Like, unless you're
Yeah.
the owner and the founder of the company, you will
Yeah.
only do something in that company, really, that makes you
Yeah.
look better. You won't do something that doesn't make you look good.
100%.
So like, um, I think that's why I think it's really exciting, and I think I don't know what like results your clients are having, but I know for us, like that's where they're going absolutely smashing it because it has that level of context to it, and people are very, very interested to chat, as a
100
result.
100%. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was telling me this thing, this like cultural value they had at their company, and I disagreed with it. It was basically like, hey, you should make decisions, one that benefit our customer first. Like that one I agree with. Then it was like two, the company, three, the department, and lastly, yourself. And I get what they're trying to go for there, right? Customers are the center of everything we do, and then do the right thing for the company, but it is inherently upside down from the way people actually feel, right? Like people don't trust, right? Like we're the first people to get laid off when the company like no longer wants us, right? So it's very
Yeah.
instinctual to like center around yourself and do the right thing for yourself until a company like proves to you that they're worth trusting. And so same thing happens for our buyers, right? Like buyers are very selfish, right? They buy things that they think are going to make them look better. They don't buy things that they think are going to get them fired or are risky, right? And it's our
Yeah.
job to kind of figure out where they fall. And you bring up a good point, which is some folks might have noticed this is not a typo that these are not in order, right? One, three, two, because the way that we think about it is you're right, layering these together, you need to do this one first. You need to build account level territories and TAMs and figure out the people that are qualified to buy from you. But then, two, within that TAM or those target accounts, you need to figure out when they're actually interested in buying from you. And then, of course, you need relevant signals, right? So this isn't like shame on those signals, like don't do that. It's just how do you layer them together to create the best opportunity that you'll have someone that's excited when you reach out to them.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so let's strip it all apart. I guess the key question is, if I've never used a signal before, how and I get this asked this quite a lot, is like what signals are important for me to track, right? Because maybe sometimes social isn't, maybe sometimes website identification isn't, blah blah blah.
Yep.
How would you suggest someone, if they're wanting to start getting into signals and set that up at their company, what signals works for that company and how do you go about finding it?
100%. Yeah. So I always think start very simply. So, like for most of our customers, we're recommending a paid plan with you guys and a free plan with us. Like, as much as I hate to admit that, right? Like, if you can start with social listening signals where people are researching things, talking about things, and site de-anonymization signals, which we do for free, right? Like those are two really good signals that will allow you to master the basics of signal-based marketing or selling. And the reason that I say like only start with two and don't bring on 10, right, is because we all know that the most important part is how you action these signals, right? Like you can have data all day long, but if you don't have a system for getting those signals into marketing or getting those signals into sales or getting those signals into your go-to-market engineering team so they can do some crazy stuff with Clay, right? Like it's going to be really difficult to build anything valuable. And this is the number one thing I talk to customers about, right? Like we have very low next to no churn, but it's because the first thing we do with our customers is say, "Hey, we're a data platform. We're going to give you signals. You're going to measure us on whether we can generate revenue with that. And that's going to come down to how you use the signals." So I think if you can start very simply and say, hey, we're going to start with one or two use cases, site de-anonymization, social listening, and then we're going to start with one or two action layers, right? So you either pick like, are we sending this to go to market engineering? They're going to do cool stuff with Clay. Are we sending this to marketing and we're going to do some really cool stuff with advertising? Or are we sending this directly to sales and they're going to do some stuff with outreach? Like you have to pick one of those. Otherwise, you're just going to have like a really cool database or CRM full of signals that don't actually do anything for you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, nice. I like that. Start small and then basically build it out. So
Yeah.
let's say someone's using the free version of Vector, the website identification or de-anonymization.
Yep.
What would you say? And you know, we use you guys, but what would you say is? I mean, I bet you get asked this a lot. Like, okay, great, I've got this set up on my account. You could be pushing this leads through to Clay. Let's say you're pushing it through to Clay or wherever.
Yep.
I want to reach out to this person because they're on my website. Maybe they've been on my website two, three times. What the fuck do I say to them without
Yeah.
being, I guess, potentially a bit creepy, being like, hey, I can see you
Yeah.
clicking around our pricing page.
Yeah.
Do you have like a framework or a kind of like
Yeah.
a thought process in mind with that?
Yeah, let's start with what you don't say, which is what you just described, right? Like, don't say, I saw you on my website, right? Because that's going to be the very first question is like you're going to what's going to happen is you're going to distract your customer from the actual value of what your offer is, and they're going to get caught in the like, but wait, how, right? And that's not what you want in the response to your cold email of like having to justify for 15 minutes like why you're able to see them. And so what we do is we try to create this sort of like serendipity of like we use this information internally, right? Of like, oh, Triggerify told us that, this person was asking about this thing or talking about this thing, or Vector told us that this person was on our website, but we don't reference that as the reason we reached out, right? Going back to that screen I was sharing before,
Yeah.
that those are what I call like excuse signals, right? Oh, I saw you raise money or I saw you post about this thing, right? That doesn't matter to your buyer. That matters to you, right? And we often get those confused. And so, the first thing that we do is we recommend for most of our customers that anytime an ICP contact comes to the website is like no matter what, whether you're doing cold email, cold calling or not, connect with them on LinkedIn, right? And stats say that like a connection request with no message will have a better acceptance rate than one with a message. And then I am a huge fan of like no pitch slapping, right? Like, so I do use automation. Like, I'll be honest, I use automation in my LinkedIn, but the message that comes after they accept is like, hey, like, you're someone that I want to learn from. I would love to like get some feedback from you, right? And it's like there's no pressure. And I totally recognize that as a founder and a CEO, I can send that message and certain reps and SDRs can't, right? It just doesn't land the same way. But regardless of like where the title or the tenure is, the underlying thesis is like don't take this really great signal someone researching and then sort of destroy the trust by saying I saw you on a website. So
Yeah.
instead focus on why you think that'd be valuable, right? Like use the signal as serendipity on why you're focusing on the right people, but then instead say like, hey, like you popped up in my feed, right? Like I saw you. It doesn't have to be why, right? It doesn't have to be on my website. Just you popped up on my feed and I was doing some clicking around and like here's something that I think we could do for you that's really valuable, right? Like lead with value, not how you got to them.
Yeah, yeah. That makes total sense. I love that. Because it and just it's funny, like I say the exact same thing. So it's like when you notice that someone is surging with content on social, it's like don't be don't be that weird person that says, hey, like I've basically stalked you and can see that you're liking all of this content and talking about these things. Like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Like, just stay away from that. Like, you need to be more like elusive and subtle on the approach. Um,
Yeah.
I agree. And you know, so it got me thinking, right? You talked about the like the different lanes when you set up vector and signals and things like that. And you talked about ads.
Mm.
And do you know, it's something that some I'm currently building this whole thing out called the network effect, which is this like whole playbook of how we've basically built and scaled Triggerfy, which is like this one continuous flywheel from content through to tracking that content, engaging that and the signals that we use, and how like it's one self-perpetual like cycle.
Yep.
And one of the things in there was ads, which we don't currently run, but I'm getting a little bit bullish that I think I just generally, and this isn't like SDRs are dead, like this comment, but I just generally think sales as we know it is changing at quite like an aggressive rate.
Yeah.
And I think Clay's, 1.2 billion valuation is like confirmation that I almost feel like the market is gambling on the fact that you are having more A players, and that's the wrong word, not A players, but like operators in the
Yeah.
control suite, and people are going to scale businesses around operators as
Yeah.
opposed to heads, which I think's been coming since COVID, and I think that's like what we saw of all like the mass
Yeah.
reduction of people. But the long story short of it, what I'm saying is I think which hasn't been done that much before. Everyone thinks about signals and then getting their sales team and SDR team on there.
Yeah.
But I think signals linked to ads is going to be an incredibly interesting play because the cost per click that you're going to basically be getting if you can generate the list of LinkedIn URLs and upload that into it doesn't even need to be a lookalike, right? You can upload the actual specific URLs into LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very interesting playbook, right? Because if you can start to create content on social media or wherever it is, which drives people to your website or drives people to keep publications, which you then track with Vector, you
Yeah.
then can start to run ads on these people, and it just is like it's like the perfect
Yeah.
growth loop without you doing any outbound, and it is going to be significantly cheaper than scaling a sales team, and
Yes.
significantly cheaper than doing traditional ads as well, which is why I think it's going to be quite exciting for this year if people start to actually work out,
Yeah.
hey, signals maybe don't belong in the
Hmm.
sales department and they
Yes.
belong more over in the marketing department where this
Yeah.
can be activated in an entirely different way. Uh,
Yes.
and that's
Yeah.
that's what like I feel like I'm going to put a lot of like bit bullish on that with the Triggerfy, and we're really trying to kind of change our ICP and go after those growths and marketing people as that's where I feel
Yeah.
it's going. But I don't
Yeah.
know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, this is I have a ton of thoughts here. And and this is something that we spent a lot of time when we were building the company really early on figuring out like where do we fit and like what space do we want to go after. And I think we made a lot of people angry when we said that we were a contact-based marketing platform, right? Because most of our customers, right, like especially in the early stages when we haven't crossed the chasm and we, haven't gotten into like the super large enterprises, right? Most of our customers are go-to-market engineers, Clay hackers, RevOps teams, right? The occasional like a crazy sales rep that wants to like be an early adopter, but like it was a lot of those sort of folks. So when we said we were a contact-based marketing platform, it confused a lot of folks, and we actually thought this was good because it meant that we were going in a direction that like we understood that like the market didn't yet. But what we think is really interesting is that when you take signals from Triggerfire, you take signals from Vector, the most common use case that customers think of is like, I'm going to create some outbound, right? Like I'm going to automate, I'm going to put some stuff in Clay, or I'm going to send this to a sales rep and we're going to go after these people. But the reality is there are so many use cases for how this data should power different departments of your go-to-market team, whether it's marketing, ads, content, etc. And so, like, not to make this a self-promotion, but Max, you and I were talking about this feature the other day in our platform where when, our customers build out these flows, whether they're powered by Trigify's data or they're powered by vectors, right? They can do stuff like this and say, hey, anytime a contact is in market for a topic I care about, let's call it like account-based marketing or something like that, right? Anytime we see a contact here, yes, of course we can send that into Clay or HubSpot or whatever. But one of the things that our really great customers are doing is contact level advertising audiences, right? So we have the ability to not just push ads in front of broad, bad targeted, expensive folks, but specifically say, hey, this ad is going to go to this person that was in market for this topic. And what's really cool about that, and Max, to your point about these sort of growth and feedback loops, is we have this other feature, which then, so we're already taking like high intent people, we're already doing contact specific ad audiences. So there's already value in like better return on ad spend and more relevancy. But then when those people click those ads, regardless of whether they convert and fill out a form, we actually can use, again, that site de-anonymization feature to reveal who they were, basically giving you an insurance plan or a second bite at the apple of the people that have engaged with these expensive advertising campaigns, but maybe didn't convert on them.
Yeah, that's epic. I love that. And I think, yeah, it's I generally this is like the future, and Chris made a good point. Is it's the end of the kind of zero interest growth, which yeah, I mean, like we spoke about this yesterday as well, didn't we, with the funding? Like, funding, the way that funding rounds are being done now is like, well, hopefully people have learned the lesson that you shouldn't raise for growth's sake. It should
Yep.
be done like in a calculated way. And I think this is this whole transition that the industry is currently taking. But we do
Yeah.
have a question that came in earlier from both Chris and Sid, actually. They're kind of the same question, which was how different or similar to Bombora's contact? I bet you get asked this all the time. Bombora's
Yeah.
contact data are you? Yeah,
Yeah.
so the question is like how different or similar to Bombora contact data, also, I believe, generated from a media co-op.
Yeah, yeah, spot on. So Bombora is doing it, in my opinion, the right way, which is they have bidstream data, but they also have a media co-op. So that thing that I talked about on how we have sort of better than just bidstream data, they're doing as well. So they're a great technology. I mean, really one of the innovators and leaders in the space when it came to account level intent. So our underlying like distribution, the way we're getting the data is very similar. So first party data co-op, it's bidstream data, but what we're doing differently is that fingerprinting. So we all know, especially like post-COVID, right? IP addresses can only get you to a household level or a company level. Doing that device fingerprinting gets you to a contact level. And I think like one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about at Vector is there's just a lot of like FUD and noise and misinformation in the industry about what signals are, what contact level signals are, right? So I won't name names, but there are some providers out there where, you go in and like you click on a contact record and you see intent, right? And you're like, oh, this is contact level intent. But if you go to another contact at the same company, it's the same intent, right? So what you're really looking at is account level intent that's just positioned at the contact level. And so that's the biggest difference is this is literally the specific contacts that we're doing that research.
Amazing, amazing. That's epic. I think one thing that we need to do, by the way, is we need to create an integration between Triggerfy and Vector. I think
Yeah.
that needs to happen. That's for sure.
100%, 100%. It's going to be ridiculously valuable, right? Because, like, again, Vector does not want to be this like singularity in ABM, right? I think we're all kind of done with that. We're tired of like $200,000 ABM contracts. There's some really cool unbundling that's happening right now with like key play for target account and
Yeah.
ICP creation, Mutiny for web personalization. And so we don't want to be the black box. Like, we're not going to tell you how the signals work. And like, we don't do social listening at all, right? And so I can't even imagine the cool things our customers could build by bringing in some of the cool things Triggerify can do with contact level intent and just, oh man, the reply rates on some of those cold emails would be insane.
Yeah, I know, right? So that kind of actually, I'm curious about that. If you were getting started, so going back to my original question was like, how do you pick the signals?
Yeah.
What? what do you think is the tech stack for signals at the moment? Like, let's say you're not a freaking huge company, okay? So it's like we got to be a little bit mindful of cash. We're not going to go buy 6 cents, although I know that you wouldn't say them, but
Yeah.
let's be
Yeah.
mindful of cash a little bit. Like, what would you say are the kind of the key platforms that you would go out and buy for signals if you weren't running a signal company, that is?
100%. Yeah. And to be honest, even running a signal company, I still recommend that, like, like we just said, vector is not the only thing that you should be thinking about, right? Like, we don't want to become this like single place where you orchestrate the signals.
Yeah,
We want to do the one thing really well, which is contact level intent. And then we're going to lean super heavily into like actioning specific things like advertising and et cetera. So so let's talk about like this scale, right? So if I was vector size, which is super early. I don't have budget for super expensive things or like the really cool platforms like Common Room or Unify, right?
yeah,
Both amazing technologies. And if you can afford them, like 100%, you should take a peek at them because they do things that Vector cannot. But I would think about it like this. I would think about what are the platforms that I need for the signals themselves, right? So I would get Trigify, I'd get Vector, maybe I would get like an affordable job champion tracking technology. I think Apollo has some of this stuff built in, but there's obviously dedicated ones as well. So I would pick the stack of the signals that I thought were most valuable, and then I would figure out where do I want to orchestrate those signals, right? So for some, it's as easy as pumping those signals into your existing marketing automation system or CRM, right? Just put all the activities on the contact and account record in HubSpot and then do some really cool stuff around list aggregation, scoring to then use that to power. For some, we all know there's some amazing like Clay agencies, Clay engineers, go-to-market engineers that are out there that can pump all of that into a Clay table and figure out how to do aggregation and signals there. And then we have some really cool companies like big logos that are like straight up GTM engineering, right? They're pumping our stuff into Postgres tables, into Redshift, into Snowflake, and they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So I think just figuring out sort of where you are on the spectrum between like, let's be simple and get started with tools that we already have, right? HubSpot's fine for pushing in signals and figuring out how to count. And then there's the common rooms on the far end, right? Where you can push a bunch of stuff and do all sorts of crazy stuff. So start simple, get something off the ground, right? What's the whole like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Like where you mentioned Clay now a few times, like where it's an interesting one, Clay. Like
Yeah.
where do you see them fitting in, like going forward? Like I just their valuation is wild. Like it's obviously it's a very particular use case. Like in fact, no, maybe not
Yeah.
where do you see them fitting in. I'm just curious on your thoughts. This is so off topic, but Clay versus Zoom Info. Which
Mm.
horse would you back out of curiosity, and why?
Man, you put me on the spot. What if either one of these guys want to acquire us someday?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, both are
uh,
good tools. I'm just
they're
both are great
both
tools, and they offer
incredibly,
different value propositions.
yeah. Henry at Zoom Info, if you want to buy me, call me. They're both really good, and they attract totally different audiences. Is like the way I see them right now, right? And I
Yeah.
think what we're going to see from Clay over the next handful of quarters is Clay figuring out how do we go from this like experts as our user to moving more into like how do the quote unquote adult enterprises leverage us, right? And like Zapier had to go through the same thing. Like, let's all be honest, like Clay's just like a sexier sideways Zapier, right? Like it's
Yeah,
basically what's
exactly.
happening there. And like Zapier went through the same thing where like they started off as like, hey, we allow hackers to like bring these workflows together, and they had to start moving into like the enterprise side of like how do we like let this scale across RevOps teams. And so Clay's going to do the same thing. It's funny. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but I think literally this morning there was like this leaked Open AI screenshot where Open AI
The
has
AI SDR?
the
Yeah,
AI
man, I
SDR.
saw
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Boom.
I know. It's just wild. And I saw a comment on there. I wish I was the genius that like thought of this, but I saw someone else's comment, which is like what OpenAI probably did was look at the trends in how their technology is being used, and they're starting to like modularize, right?
100%,
That
100%. So for everyone who is listening, right? So basically, yesterday or it may have been today, but OpenAI announced in Tokyo that they are introducing an AI SDR, a sales agent. Now, it's a little bit limited at first, but effectively what it's going to do is it can take your book a demo form from your website. It can research those people. It can check calendar availability. It can fill in any missing kind of details. And then it can create an email using their new agent as well called Deep Research to basically email them. But what my views on this, right? And I actually just did a post about this today, is I if I was an AI SDR tool, I'd be freaking shitting myself a little bit here, right? And because you're so right. So like, and I think Clay can do this,
Hmm.
and OpenAI, and it's like if you are the place where everyone builds on top of, you can
Hmm.
basically see what works and what gains momentum, and whatever does, you can just be like, brilliant. Well, we'll just do that, and because we're the source, we can do it infinitely cheaper, most likely. Plus, everyone's going to come to us because it's most likely going to be better.
Yep.
And this agent that they're going to launch is just the start. It's probably going to get better and better. And if I was an AI SDR tool now, I'd be shitting myself slightly. But the way that I would counteract this is they will always be horizontal. OpenAI will always be horizontal with their value proposition. And what I mean by that is they won't specialize in anything. The AI will be just kind of good for like a bit of everything, but not hyper focused. So if I was an AI SDR, I would basically just want to go vertical and have like, for example, like a pharmaceutical AI SDR
Mhm.
because they won't go to that granularity and you can train a model on very specific pharmaceutical reference-based things, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
That in my head is the only defensibility that you're going to have. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, if you build wrappers around these LLMs, you got to expect some repercussion at some point. And
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
that's starting to happen. It's very exciting. And we were originally building an AI SDR with Triggerfy. The very
Really.
first prototype that we did was an
Yeah.
AI like SDR. And we literally launched it for 2 days and we thought, fuck, this is shit,
Yep.
and dismantled it.
At least you had the forethought. I remember it just I think a lot of our audience are these amazing hackers and engineers and go-to-market folks. And so I'm sorry to admit like I'm a sellout. We went VC backed, right? So we've got investors. And I remember doing, a couple of our fundraising rounds and it was at the time AI was so hot and we weren't an AI company, right? We were a deep data company and I just remember laughing to myself every time I got a no from these investors. I was like, guys, the ones you're investing in for the most part are wrappers around someone else's technology. And like you are going to be commiserate to like whatever happens there. So to get back onto your question, I think what Clay has indicated is they're going to do exactly that, right? They're going to see the common use cases that people are doing. They're going to realize there's like 5 or 6 like go to market ops type things that they need to do. And I forget what it was, but I saw like a week or two back, they had acquired some company that my interpretation was it was like the Salesforce RevOps sort of like part of the business, right? Where this company has like deep integrations into Salesforce. And so I think some of those like right now it's like you're given a table and you have to figure out like what to update. I think we're going to start to get like more packaged, modularized, like here's what you do. I bet they're going to go into like the Chili Piper lean data. You can now do like lead routing really well as a use case in a Clay table. You can like probably integrate with call recording and like update fields, right? They're going to start to say like, here's the 7 things RevOps teams do with us. Um, and I think it's going to be super smart. They've got a big valuation that they got to grow into, but they seem to be able to execute super well. So I'm excited to see in 10 years what we look back and we either laugh or say, man, I wish we would have invested in that. Who knows?
Yeah, God. Do you know what? The one thing, one thing that's said, and I don't know if you feel this, but like building and running a software business, you realize no matter how simple you think you make your product, people still get really confused, and you're like, how? Like this is so like easy.
Yeah.
I can see how to do it. The fact that they have managed to get people to use Clay, which like is so cool. I'm just like, it is incredible because like people
Yeah.
still struggle with Triggerfy. I'm like, whoa, like, dude, this is so easy to use.
Yeah.
Like, how did Clay get over that? I've got never like kudos to them, man. Like, fair play. Like, I think it did take them quite a long time though. Like, in it, they were quite clever. They went down the agency route and then had them build that, and then it's like
Yeah.
catch on. But
Yeah. My
uh, Yeah.
My co-founder is always curious, right? Because when you're building a company, it always feels like everyone's running faster than you, right? You could be an insanely fast-growing company, but you always feel like you're behind. And so I remember a year or two ago when we first came across Clay, my co-founder being like, "How, dude? Like, how have they grown so fast?" And then I remember pulling up the Wayback or the Time Machine or the web archives and being like, "Dude, they've been at this for 7 years, right? In the first five
Yeah,
years was
dude,
like
I know. They've been at it a
insane."
long time. Like you just
Yeah.
don't realize like you feel like that they're new, but no,
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
been
They
around.
were like building some like integrations platform for engineers, which is probably where sort of a lot of the, ability to plug into lots of different systems came from. And then eventually they just realized like, hey, there's a pain in go-to-market engineering and waterfalling data. And so they figured it out. Yeah, it's incredible to see. But I think what they've really done well is they've mastered the whole crossing the chasm thing, right? They understood that 99% of folks are not going to be able to understand how to use their UI, right? But they've made fanatics out of those early adopters that have figured
Uh,
it out.
it's good. It's impressive. Their product marketing is very good. So going back to signals, right?
Yeah.
Answer me this because I sometimes get confused on my own answer with this. I'm curious to yours.
Yeah.
Triggers versus signals. Is it just a
Mm.
fucking marketing term that a trigger is a signal and a signal is a trigger, or do you believe that they are two different things?
No, it's a marketing term. Look, hang on. Let me think
I
about
don't
it for
see
a
that.
second
I,
here.
I don't
Yeah.
even know. Like sometimes I'm like, I think it is, but actually, hold on. Is a trigger like when is a trigger actually like a signal of the exact time to reach out, and a signal is more like a qualification? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes go around
it's
in my head about it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, so here's my like I've thought about it for a whole 4 seconds, and here's my strongly held opinion from 4 seconds of thinking. I think a trigger is a definition that is held by a company, right? Yeah, Sid said it perfectly. Stack signals, right? So a trigger to me is when signals have surmounted a certain level of frequency or tenacity that like we believe that okay, this is a trigger now. And what's
Bang, yeah,
so
you reach out now. I
Exactly.
guess like if you look at it like when you're building stuff in Zapier or Make or something,
Yeah.
what is the initial node?
It's a
It's the
trigger. Yeah, it's
trigger.
a
So the
trigger.
trigger
Yeah.
should always be like, now's the time. Because I guess you
Exactly.
could
Yeah.
like they could visit your website multiple times, go on particular publications multiple times. Still
Yep.
doesn't necessarily mean now is the time to reach out to them. You're
Yes.
just kind of collecting these signals. And so yeah, stack signals. I like that, Sid. We have a
Yeah.
question which has come in through the host and panelists. So I'm going to read it out so everyone knows what it is. Do you think that skills used today to build out clay tables will be obsolete in the near future? For example, simply prompting or voice prompting, basically telling the tools what you want done without intricacies of manually setting everything up.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I struggle with this because like I am an engineer, right? Not a good one, but I'm an engineer for the last 20 years of my life. And so I by default fall into the bucket of wanting to say that my skill sets are so special and so valuable and they can't be replaced. But like I mean, look at one of the hardest skills of being an artist, right? For better or worse, got replaced by Midjourney and all these different things that allow us to, whip up imagery. And by the way, there's a whole side debate on the ethics of that and whether that's fair. And I think that, artists' work should be artists' work. But at the end of the day, right, Zapier can do this, right? You can go into a Zap today, and the first box that's there now is type what you want us to do, right? And it will
Yeah.
go assemble the different triggers and filters and actions that you want there. And so, there's an argument to be made. And I want to believe it, but I'm going to quickly disagree with myself. There's an argument to be made that there's always going to be the certain level of intricacies that can't be done by an AI, right? If you, and this is the case today, but I think it's going to go away, right? Like there are certain things where if I want to build a scraper to go look at, all of my prospects' websites to see if a competitor exists by looking in the console to see if a certain object is defined or undefined, right? These are sort of like I can prompt an AI and it's going to get pretty close, but I'm going to have to give it the nuances of our Postgres database and the things that we're looking for. But like it's come so far so quickly that I would
Uh,
be a fool to say that like in three
bro,
months it's not going to be able to do it all for
I
us.
see. I am not an engineer, right?
Yeah.
But I won't lie to you. I am coding hardcore on so I like here's my coding tech stack. So we got Cursor up and running, and I use Cursor for like front end stuff.
Yeah.
Also, I've done like a self-hosted version of Bolt. It's like a DIY version of Bolt, which
Yeah.
also helps me spin things up.
Yeah.
Then I'm using VS Code, and I'm using Klein, which is an agent that you can get inside of like VS Code to do more backend stuff because it works better
Yeah.
at backend stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not an engineer, but holy crap, like I've been spinning up applications left, right, center. And for someone like me who, you know, I hate it when people call themselves a serial entrepreneur because I'm not. I've only ever started Triggerfy. But like for someone who just wants to keep creating things,
Yeah.
it's bloody distracting for me because I'm like, shit, I got Triggerfy, but I'm like, I could build this app. And I just
Yep.
like I spent all weekend like just building stuff. Like I built so much stuff that
Yep.
I'm not doing anything with.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think, and my CTO refuses to use these AI tools because he's like they do spit out crap and they lack the context and it gets messy and stuff like that. And I do agree with him. I think it's going to empower people, but you still have to have context. Like it'll always suffer from the context. That's the part that it will.
They're getting better though.
They are
Cursor
getting
can
better,
like,
man. They
yeah,
are. They are.
you can hit like Command Enter and Cursor will ingest like the entire code base as context
Bro, you
now
can.
to your question. It's wild.
It is wild out there, but I think going back to your question, Danny, which I think I envision a future if we take it away from AI coding, if we look at like a Clay table, I think Clay would be naive not to be thinking about adding like a feature like, hey, I think the world, and I think this includes the Signal world, like every product will have to start thinking about some form of like text functionality to surface data for people because people are now just going to get more and more used to speaking to systems rather than like visualizing systems.
Yep.
And it's like when the phone first came out, like, you get a little bit lazy, but then you also don't because your laziness kind of
Yeah.
it manifests. But I do see someone like Clay introducing like a kind of an NLP way to
Yeah.
build a table at some stage. Zapier
Yeah.
already doing it, Bardine already doing it from what I've seen.
Hmm.
Uh, co that it'd be pretty easy to do those things in those systems because it's not hard to build that. Building a full stack application via an agent, you know,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
jury's out on how good it will be, how scalable. That's the hard part as well. It's like but yeah, I think it's going to get there. And you guys for your ghosts, right? You guys are
Yeah.
using AI for your ghosts, if I'm not mistaken.
100%. I'm a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black because I care a lot about where the content and the training comes from for these models, and I get very frustrated when I think about there's probably a lot of artists that had their data ingested and now these things get created. But we're working with a company that I love called Lasco,
Yeah,
which is they've taken all of the original brand content that we made. So we were the original creators of, our identity, our colors, our illustrations. But what they've done is they've trained a specific model off of our brand. And so, I can now go in there every time we get a new employee, we generate them a ghosty
yeah, it's very
that
cool.
like
I
is
saw that post. Yeah, I love that.
it's super cool. And so, I just did it. We have a new head of marketing that's coming in a week and a half. And she was on the phone, or we were texting a couple nights ago, and she said, I want my ghost to have like a Taylor Swift vibe. And I just chatted, right? Like take our brand, take our theme, and make it look a little bit more like Taylor Swift. And like 30 seconds later, we had our ghosty generate. It's wild.
Bro, what's a Taylor Swift ghost look like?
So there's don't none of the TS folks like come at me if I get this wrong. There's the what's the anti-hero music video that was super
Yeah, yeah.
popular. There's these ghosts in it where they're wearing these like these sort of masks or cloaks, and they've got different patterns, and like one has heart glasses and like a Greek leaf headband on. And so like I literally just had to like point it at like that Taylor Swift music video, and it was like, here's your vector branded ghost that looks just like it. It's insane.
That's incredible, man. I love that. Well, we're nearing end of time. The last question I have for you is around Vector. What does the future hold for you guys this year? What's the roadmap look like? What are you working on? Can you spill any secrets that you haven't told anyone?
Yeah.
Exclusive to this audience. Yeah, spill the
Yeah.
beans.
Yeah. Okay. So let me dive into. I'm trying to think of like what would our head of engineering get least mad with me for sharing. I think the one that we haven't shared with our customers that is going to be really incredible and it's coming like very, very soon is right now, we consider ourselves sort of a raw data company. You said this really well earlier, Max, which is, not everyone that researches a keyword off of your website is ready to purchase from you. In fact, right, think about it. Most people are researching things that they probably already own, right? Like I'm in market for HubSpot all the time because I'm searching for articles and I'm looking up FAQ docs, right? That doesn't mean I want to buy HubSpot, right? And so we need to get better at being an intelligence layer that it's not on our customers to figure out where real intent is. We need to start calculating that and looking at patterns and consistencies. And so we're working on something really cool right now, which we're calling the buyer journey model, which can take all these first and third party signals and understand exactly what real intent looks like based off surging and sort of contact level stuff. So we got some pretty cool AI that's going to be able to tell you exactly when people are in market.
Wicked, wicked. That's cool, man. I really like that. And that is solving like when I think about what your tool does, like if I was truthful, like one of the biggest bugbears is like, well, I still don't like, are they just searching that generically? Like you said, your HubSpot example is so perfect. And so
Yeah.
you add that in like wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be good, man. We're excited to be building alongside with you guys. I think companies like Trigify and Vector are certainly going to be some really amazing names and really help both marketers and sellers and go-to-market teams like really figure out how to navigate the next 10 years of a very challenging go-to-market landscape. So we're excited to be a partner of yours, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. All good. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone. We got one next Thursday as well. So turn up to that. But for now, appreciate it, buddy. All the best.
Good to see you guys. Thanks again.